almost all fintechs will have somebody who manages bank partnerships, which is sort of a role that has morphed and developed over the past few years. Whereas historically, a lot of the bank partnerships were managed purely by the treasury teams at these fintech companies, because the angle was always about, okay, how can I use a bank? The role has sort of moved away from that to saying, there are two ways I can work with a bank, and therefore I need somebody on the fintech side who can actually speak to banks, talk their language, sell the product, and actually figure out what are both ways of looking at it. So a lot of the people that we speak to at some of these fintechs are actually folks on the payment side or on the product side who are actually responsible for payment partnerships. So I think that definitely shows you how the thinking has evolved, both from a bank side and a fintech side as well. Yeah. And in most of the meetings that we've had here as well, right, half the conversation is about how can we help you. The other half is, okay, how can we partner with you? I don't think it's a question of banks versus fintechs anymore, right? I think it's always going to be bank and fintech. You go to any bank who is, any fintech rather, who's saying, I want to expand into Asia or Middle East or in Africa. How are they getting the payment out at the end of the day? They need to use a bank, right? So there's always going to be a bank at the back end. It's a question of where does the aggregation happen? Is the aggregation happening at the bank level or at the fintech level? And for us, if we look at it holistically as a bank, it really doesn't matter as long as you're supporting the flows end to end. How those flows get originated, whether directly through us or it's coming through a fintech, we are still supporting the flows at the end of the day. So for us, I think it's really more of a collaborative approach. I think that is definitely a very interesting sort of development that we're seeing a lot. I think if you go to any let's say a store and you're paying by a card, right? That is a fairly seamless experience today. You're paying by credit cards and debit cards, and you obviously have Apple Pay and Google Pay and all these layers that have added on over it. You just tap your phone, money's going out. In a lot of markets that we are present in, Asia and Africa especially, not a lot of the population actually uses credit cards and debit cards. A lot of the payments in those markets actually happen via bank accounts, or it's happening through QR code. You go to a store and you're buying something, the checkout counter will have a QR code, you scan it, the payment goes through. But this is actually going out from a bank account. So actually helping set up these banking rails for these e-commerce companies and these fintech companies so that they can start collecting via bank accounts. I think it's an important part. I think the other interesting angle which actually helps make the payment seamless is you have to be API first when you're talking to these fintechs, right? You cannot have the legacy way of, a fintech logging into a portal and sending a payment file to a bank. That is absolutely cannot be sustainable in the long run. Therefore, StanChart is very sort of API first in terms of how we look at collaborating with these companies, whether it's providing real-time notifications the moment the transaction happens. Do I get a credit notification? Do I get a debit notification? Can I see real-time balances on my app whenever I'm looking at a potential transaction? Having the ability to support that in many of our markets is actually very important to us.